Student A demonstrates development at the beginning of the emerging stage of writing according to the EALD learning progressions. Although he has only been in Australia since the beginning of the year, Student A demonstrates good exposure to English that was present in his home country Taiwan, as well as demonstrates good development and progress towards writing and understanding writing purposes. According to the EALD learning progressions, in this emerging stage of writing, Student A showcases good formation of simple sentences within their text and some good use of conjunctions such as and to attempt to create compound sentences. Student A also showcases good understanding of sequencing to organize and structure their text with the use of firstly, secondly, lastly, as well as good use of text structure and familiar language patterns to form their writing. Student A also demonstrates good handwriting by correctly forming letters and letter sounds to write sight words and scientific vocabulary in the proper context. Although Student A demonstrates good understanding of writing at this emerging stage, there are still some areas of improvement and further support that would be needed in order to enhance their understanding of writing. These include using basic punctuation consistently throughout their writing, such as full stops, as well as appropriate use of capital letters. Consistently using articles such as a to create grammatically correct sentences and using appropriate expressions to formulate these sentences. Other areas of improvement include utilizing subject-verb agreement when talking about butterflies and using the correct verb choice to create grammatically correct sentences. Looking at the whole text level, another area of improvement would be the use of spacing and forming paragraphs to separate ideas.
The literacy goal within the context and rationale is students demonstrate their understanding through writing and explanation. Students from Lesson 3 start exploring the structure of an explanation. Overall, an ELD student in this unit of work in writing needs to develop control over text structure, technical vocabulary, present tense, time and casual conjunctions to express cause and effect relationships, and compound and complex sentences to increase cohesiveness. With the text used for reading and writing, all texts used are factual information. It can often be difficult for ELD students to make sense of the literate, often dense language across learning areas. Particularly as these texts are lexically dense, too much information or too many new words can become very overwhelming for ELD students.
Challenges for Student A within this unit of work would be the reliance on oral language in various activities, the use of cause and effect to provide reasoning and justification, the complex field of natural disasters, the same ability grouping for an unfamiliar topic, the various complex terminology, the lack of scaffolding in brainstorming or activation of prior knowledge, and the reliance on background knowledge of natural disasters without any teaching of it. Other challenges for Student A within this unit of work would be the lack of scaffolding for independent sentences and peer discussions, the lack of resources such as graphic organizers for writing, and the lack of explicit instruction when looking at scientific skills such as reading maps.
The cyclone text is lexically dense with way too many new technical words for Student A in one lesson. Words and meaning need to be broken down gradually rather than being read in one go and can be taught through images. Student A has no prior knowledge of what the genre of explanation is. Learning about the structure of an explanation in one go, including needing a title, phenomenon, identification, and an explanation sequence is overwhelming. It needs to be broken down over multiple lessons. The task of enjumbling is also too complicated for Student A. An alternative could be using visual organizers. The teacher questions in this lesson sequence also are way too broad for an ELD learner. For example, what did you learn? The teacher should be focusing on asking questions with more specific answers. The teacher needs to revise content on cause and effect from Lesson 5 before starting Lesson 6 to refresh memory. The teacher should be intentionally pairing Student A with another peer, one who understands his language background, or the teacher for guidance. Illustrations are always helpful for understanding rather than reading. For the matching activity, cause and effect sentences need to be explicitly revised/explained again before the interactive activity so Student A knows exactly when to stand up. The teacher should also make sure she is gradually changing the field to natural disasters, rather than it being all at once. For the matching game, the teacher should intentionally choose Student A's illustration or strip of writing to what suits his ability and where he's at with his reading and writing. This game is good as it involves working in a team, and his peers can help him for support. Analysis on the unit work text type is writing an explanation on why do we get tropical cyclones, as the title suggests. This is a sequential explanation. The purpose of a sequential explanation is explaining why something happens or how something happens in a linear sequence. Sequential explanations are written in the timeless present tense, and they are about a generalized phenomenon. After writing a title, stage 1 includes phenomenon identification. This should be done in the first sentence. For example, cyclones are tropical storms with high winds. Stage 2 is explanation sequence. This is explaining a process in order. Sequential activities are organized not only in terms of time, but also in terms of the places where the events occur. This explanation uses a passive voice rather than active. We often want to focus on the phenomenon being explained rather than who is doing the action, and to do that, it needs to be written with a passive voice rather than active.
Lesson 2 has various gaps for Student A in Year 6. Some of these challenges include an overload of information as well as an overload in learning new geographical map concepts. In this lesson, there is also a lack of scaffolds for Student A to gain understanding of geographical concepts and sentence structures. There is also a heavy reliance on writing in this lesson and no room for multimodal ways of representing learning. Lesson 2 first begins with the teacher building background knowledge by displaying a world map and by prompting students with questions about cyclones. This can be differentiated to support Student A by using translanguaging and incorporating the translation of cyclone in Mandarin. This allows the student to activate any prior knowledge they have of this term and build scientific understanding of the concept that he might already have. This part of the lesson can also be enhanced by adding other multimodal resources, such as images and matching text to images. This fosters continuity in learning and highly supports the learning of key language. Another part of the lesson that can be differentiated to help support the EALD student is the model text. This can be differentiated through the dialogic teaching strategy that occurs between the teacher and student and their approach to a task together. This can be implemented through the dictogloss activity, where the teacher reads aloud a section of the model text several times and the student has to note down what they already know, what they want to know, and what they have found out. Lesson 3 has various challenges for Student A. Some of these challenges include identifying the main components of an explanation text and the terms of these without existing prior knowledge, being placed in the same ability grouping, and independently unjumbling an explanation text and its specific whole text stages. When looking at the explicit teaching of structure and stages of an explanation text in Lesson 3, Student A could be further supported through the use of multimodal resources to clearly and coherently understand the parts of an explanation text. Resources such as graphic organizers to structure the title, phenomenon, and explanation sequence. This would provide Student A with a visual idea of how an explanation text is sequenced and support their writing when creating an explanation text. In the next part of the lesson, where students are placed in the same ability grouping to sort the different types of text, scaffolding can be provided to support Student A. This can be implemented through the use of a text checklist where students are guided in making decisions of each text and where they belong. The use of sentence stems as a scaffold will support students to make justifications when classifying the different types of text. This supports students to discern the different texts as well as provide support in their reasoning.
Lesson 5 is specifically focusing on cause and effect vocabulary and how phenomena relate. This can be challenging for ELD learners as this focuses on complex sentences and compound sentences. The lesson immediately starts with students working in pairs. The teacher should intentionally pair Student A with a student with the same language background but more advanced in the L2 for think pair shares. The teacher should allow Student A to start only with focusing on the more familiar words like because, which is a cause, or so, which is an effect, before trying more challenging cause and effect words. With Student A being in a pair with someone with the same language background as them, translanguaging can be used in their pair. They can move back and forth between linguistic repertoire, allowing Student A to engage in interactive meaning-making processes. To teach Student A what a cause and effect is, the teacher can use multimodal resources including visual images. The teacher can also explain cause and effect by using everyday experiences Student A has. For example, today it was raining at school, so I brought my raincoat. When it comes to highlighting connector words, the teacher can extend this time for Student A. During explicit teaching time, the teacher, when explaining connector words, should keep a word bank on the wall of all the connector words for Student A to use. Before reading the cyclone text, the teacher beforehand should use visual images again displayed on the screen to explain new complex terminology specific to cyclones which Student A has not been taught before. Challenges are most likely to occur in this lesson during explicit instruction where the teacher models how to write body paragraphs in sequence of order. Watching the video on how cyclones are formed, it's important that the teacher breaks down the video and pauses it to create more meaningful sections. This gives students time to process new information learned and time to explain new vocabulary if there is any confusion. Allowing students to draw the sequence shown from the video allows for a different way for students to show understandings or concepts. The teacher can provide a worksheet with graphic organizers with the correct number of parts in the sequence of a cyclone to make the task clearer. With the aim of students to write their own explanation, it is important that the teacher articulates clear and explicit learning intention, goals, and expectations. Ikara on page 8 states, it is better to set the same high expectations for all students and to provide differentiated levels of support to ensure all students have a fair chance to achieve these expectations. The teacher should also break her teaching modelling for both paragraph 1 and 2 into smaller, meaningful parts. With teacher modelling of paragraphs, it's important the teacher is embedding the explicit teaching of grammar points in context through scaffolding.